Right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another deep dive. Today, super special guest, Tim Clancy. It's your real name, right? I
Yeah,
don't.
that is my real name.
Okay. um, yeah. So you actually met one of my colleagues, buddy, out at we're at East Denver, right? And
Yeah, yeah, I think it was at the soiree. I'm not totally sure where we met, but
yeah. But I guess you've maybe if you can give us like a little bit of background on yourself. I know you're building an L2 and you have a bunch of other stuff going on, but maybe we can all just catch up quick.
yeah, a little bit of a background on me. I came to Ethereum not super late, not super early. It was kind of towards the tail end of 2016. I became aware of it mostly in a way that Bitcoin hadn't clicked for me yet. Looking at Ethereum and seeing, oh, this is a big global unstoppable state machine that you can write arbitrary programs on that are always decentralized and can't be stopped, right? Like the whole smart contract angle was very compelling to me in the way that I think many other early developers share. And then, yeah, I graduated college, was previously slated to just go into normal big tech, working at Amazon and the like, but went straight into crypto after graduation. And I've been here ever since working on Ethereum projects. I bounced around from a few, and now I'm more or less working on an L2 that I think needs to exist because it's one that I would not be able to take issue with, right? And that's the entire mission. It's not necessarily trying to be the fastest or the best, but it's trying to get the exit window that is currently missing from everyone else.
So yeah, I mean that's the question. Like I guess you sort of answered it. Like why does another L2 need to exist, right? Like
Yeah, it shouldn't, right? It's embarrassing that I'm even like working on this. What basically happened was about a year ago, I was looking, I'm like, okay, I want to go and build more applications. I want them to scale in the way that Ethereum mainnet is, expensive, does not get us there. But I recognize that it's the most decentralized base layer. It has the best validator distribution. It has the best like long-term economic security. But you look at every L2 and you go to L2 Beat, fantastic resource, and they do all the research, and you're like, why are these all centralized? And it's like, well, let's go see what the problem is. And the problem for every single L2 right now, all the general purpose ones, right? There are some real L2s, but they're application specific. So like DYDX was a real L2, Fuel V1 for payments, Aztec Connect for payments. But you look at something like Optimism or Arbitrum, and there's that security council of people who can push through an instantaneous upgrade whenever they want. And the big problem is that it's instantaneous, that it's not constrained to a time lock. And the idea there is, well, if there's a bug, we need to be able to upgrade right away as soon as we know about it. But the flip side is, well, that's a group of 7 people on a multi-sig who, what if we have a Bybit happen to those signers and all of a sudden that's the entire TVL of a chain gone, right? And so L2's got really given this kind of status by Ethereum that I didn't see us give to any other major smart contract, right? Like if a DeFi contract was instantaneously upgradable, no one would use it. There'd be riots.
eh,
Well, in the old
sure.
days, maybe we would have, right? We used to care.
Right.
Like OpenSea, for instance, even before Seaport, OpenSea had a time lock where if
Right.
they upgrade the contract, they couldn't steal your NFT listings, right? It's like we took that somehow more seriously than we do all of the TVL on Base, all the TVL and Optimism on Arbitrum, all these tens of billions of dollars. And it's kind of sad to see because like you have to steel man like the attacks from alt L1s, right? Which is that the rollup centric roadmap is not actually secured by Ethereum. Stuff like, Solana is more decentralized than Arbitrum and all of our L2s. And it's, well, yeah, because they have no exit window, right? They're just multi-sig secured. And so that pisses me off. I don't want to have that be the case. And I think there needs to be at least some execution environment that just goes for it, right? If it's the YOLO L2, if it's not like if you're not confident in your proof system being correct, you shouldn't be on mainnet, and you shouldn't be encouraging billions of dollars in TVL to onboard onto your chain. And
Sure.
so we're gonna do a little test net. We're gonna sit on it until we're satisfied that the exit window works, and then once we go to mainnet, it's going to be extremely throttled. And I'm not going to let more ETH on there that I'm not prepared to make whole personally for the first 60, 90 days, however long it takes for me to feel confident that this thing isn't going to get immediately wrecked. And at that point, you launch it and you kind of pray the same way every major DeFi project launches and prays, right?
Well, I
So
mean,
that's
yeah,
my
there's
take
safe
on.
ways to do it, and there's not safe ways. I mean, to sort of play the, I agree with you a lot on the decentralization stuff, but to play the other side, like if you talk to Arbitrum and Optimism, they would say that they're on the path towards decentralization, right? Like eventually they're going to do it, and
Yeah.
this has always been the plan. Um, Granted, here we are several years later. Are you calling their bluff on this plan, or do you think they'll get there?
I think they'll get there. I do
Okay.
think it's always been the plan. My beef right now is you should have told us from the get-go that you were going to wait 4 years to get here, right? It's like Ethereum itself went from ICO to Genesis block in only 9 months, and we're waiting on an L2 for 4+ years on some of these guys. And that's the ridiculous part, because it's, was this the focus? Why are you here for this long? And why is the marketing never reflected that these are unsafe? It's like, do you really think it's okay to have tens of billions of dollars secured by only your multi-sig? Like, that's the hard question that we have to ask Arbitrum and Optimism and it's like, is this actually decentralized? And the real reason is no. Like, no one's going to go and launch a Tornado Cash on an L2 because they know it's useless, right? That gets sanctioned. That's not immutable. That's not real, because then the government comes and cracks down on the operators, right? And says,
Right.
And yeah, that's really the like, that's my take on it. And I think it's fine, right? Like, when they launched, there was a lot of goodwill. Like, obviously Ethereum needed it. People can go. But at this point, it's it's like, what are you doing? And it's sad, because I know I'm the crazy person in the room who still seemingly cares about this. And a lot of people are just building on base, and that's fine. But I'm the holdout who isn't using the L2 yet because it's not Ethereum. And so,
Sure. Well, yeah, it's kind of fascinating because, like what would, because like there are other centralization issues besides even just the exit window that most people talk about with L2s, namely the sequencer
right.
centralization and things like that. Like do you see those as being other issues that we have to tackle, or is it like if you just add
Yeah.
an exit window, is it good enough?
For me personally, an exit window is good enough. The
Okay.
centralized sequencer, right, is decentralizing the sequencer. I think is great. It's good, but it's kind of like improving the happy path, like of an L2, where if worse comes to worse, like the whole point of an exit window is like every single person in the world can conspire against you, and you can still escape to Ethereum L1 all by yourself. So it's like, if they have that, I don't necessarily care if under normal operation the L2 is completely centralized, or if under normal operation there's more than one sequencer. That's more of a matter for MEV concerns more than anything else. But like a lot of applications, right? Like, if they're not even inherently financial in nature, there is no MEV, right? Like, if I'm just running a voting application, I don't really care if the transactions are out of order. So there's a lot of stuff you can build that just doesn't, that's not even a concern for more than anything. But yeah, it's like, so for me, like personally, an exit window would be good enough. And I think it's kind of a red herring, the way a lot of L2s are like, it's not red herring, I should say. Like, decentralizing the sequencer is a way to get to that exit window, but it's certainly not the easiest way, in my opinion, as opposed to just like slap a time lock on the upgrade mechanism and you're there. So I wish we'd taken the lazy path to an exit window before we try and do some of the more fancy stuff, just so we would have had the theoretical security sooner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of, like I'm sure maybe I can bring it up, but like a lot of the discussion right now is like, was the L2 roadmap even the right decision, right? Like everyone there is talking like, should we be pushing these L2s, or should we go back to, now people are saying like, oh well, they actually need to be based rollups or native rollups, whatever you want to call them.
Right. Almost like the old execution shard idea. Should we have stuck with that? And
Yeah.
so I can talk about that a little bit if you want.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah. If you know anything about, yeah, would love to.
so like, just at a high level, I don't think the roll-up centric roadmap like is a bad idea. And I don't think it's been a strategic failure,
Do you say this
because
just from the fact of running an L2 rollup, or is it?
no, because I'm not even running one, right?
Okay.
We don't exist. We're not making any money. Like, I'm just looking at this. I think like it makes sense, because like all the sheer amount of like dissuading competing alt L1s, first of all, right? Like how many of these L2s would have been alt L1s if Ethereum, because they want money. They're running businesses on Ethereum. At least if they do decentralize, we get to inherit some security from them. So it's better for the whole world computer narrative in the first place. They're using ETH as their native token. It furthers ETH's moneyness. At like a very basic level, I think that's good, just being like the open block space. So it's not really been like a strategic failure, but I think it's like a tactical failure, again, for the same exact reason that none of these L2s are Ethereum. And it's like sad that like, we're letting base use Ethereum branding without actually being secured by Ethereum. I don't really care that they're making a killing and 90% margins on reselling block space and that like ETH is not deflationary anymore because I've always been here for like the world computer narrative, right? It's like if we're going to
Sure.
consume every single lick of software on the entire planet and have it all running on Ethereum, we're going to need L2s. I just want them to actually care about like what Ethereum L1 cares about. And that's sort of the culture that didn't get exported, obviously, which is why we're still here in 2025 with no exit window.
Yeah, well, I mean, even before, like I remember like fighting, like I'm in the Oracle space. Oracles have been multi-sigs for years and years and years. And it's been pretty bad, but like even like most of the time, like back in like 2018, 2019, when you were talking like the decentralization community on Ethereum, it was all about like trying to get people to run a node. Like, like is there any of that culture that is even around in L2 land, or like do we, because like I've tried to run some L2 nodes and it's really, really difficult, if even possible, most of the time.
Yeah, so I think like when it is possible, it's still kind of pointless because it's not like, I mean, I think we'll see more people do it when it's what is required to actually safely use the L2.
So you
Like,
think bringing on an L2 exit window, people will actually run nodes?
yeah, because suddenly there's an incentive to do it, right? Like there's a reason
Sure.
to do it. Right now, like it doesn't matter if I'm running my own node for base arbitrum optimism, like that can't help me. I mean, like it's nice to always have your own node. You're not relying on someone else's RPC. There's benefits there.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, the security is no better than just trusting the multi-sig because you have to do that anyways, right? And then, yeah, I remember like the whole Ethereum onboarding used to be like, I won't send you ETH until you sit down and like I see you running your own full node on your laptop.
Yeah.
Um, I think we all know that's not like totally practical for everyone, but we're gonna get there again in a similar way eventually. Like if you look at some of the work on the roadmap, like RES, for instance, which is like stateless version of Reth. I was looking at that recently for just some other work. And it's cool. Like stateless clients are coming. Like there is a big focus from core devs. We will get them at some point. It's not necessarily like the big focus right now, which is still trying to ship Pectra and then Pure Das, so we have more blobs and more scaling on L2s. But like I don't know if you saw like the beam chain presentation from Justin at
Good.
DevCon. Right. It's like that's a very compelling vision for like the end state of Ethereum is like I'm running a validator on a smartwatch and like I'm helping attest to network correctness and all of Ethereum snarkified onto itself. Like we'll get back towards that idea of everyone more meaningfully contributing to the decentralization of the network without like having to run a full node themselves.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, like, how much of it do you think has to be like a social thing, right? Like, because like running a node, it's always been like you're expected to it. You don't necessarily have to, but you're expected to do it. Do you think
Oh,
like people can be? Do you think it can be a cultural shift, or does it have to be sort of built into some of these wallets and stuff?
it's gonna have to be built in for it to
Okay.
happen meaningfully at scale. The culture's cooked, right? And that's why I think I do appreciate at least that Ethereum recognizes this, which
Okay.
is why proposals like Fossil, like the fork choice censorship resistance inclusion lists, are awesome because it works with like the 3% of the network being home stakers who aren't using MevBoost, right? And it's like we can never expect it to be more than that. No one's going to run like people aren't going to stop using Lido. They're not going to like start running nodes at home and not using MevBoost. But like I certainly am one of those guys, and like you don't
Sure.
need many other people proportionately to have this crazy like impact on the network to like basically stop all builder censorship, right?
Well, that's always the goal, but like we had, like I was big in pushing against like the LST centralization. So trying to, like even like the question was always like if Lido, like it's super funny they stopped at like 30%. Because the question was always if they get above 33%, do you do like a social layer fork to bring them back or something
Right.
like that?
Right.
And it was a very super interesting discussion because like I don't know, yeah, like what do you do if it goes that route? And same with now, like if 33% ETH got put on Coinbase or got put on Optimism, like is that a risk? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I wasn't a Lido 33%er because like it's like if they do something wrong, then yeah, maybe you would intervene to socially slash, or maybe you just let them bleed because 33% also like isn't the cutoff. That's like when we can't finalize, but like the inactivity
Yeah.
leak would still kill them eventually. And so I was like, that's kind of self-correcting, but um, do you socially slash at that point? Like, maybe I wouldn't for 33%.
Right.
Maybe I would for 51. Maybe I definitely would for 2/3. Right.
Well, but it's difficult though, because like that was what we were saying, because like you obviously see like Lido was always like the canary in the coal mine, like the big one that's coming or people think is coming is like Coinbase, right? So like if you get that staking ETF coming in, then eventually like Bitcoin, all of the inflows into ETH are going to be staked and they're going to be in an ETF held by Coinbase. Um, right now, it looks like Coinbase is probably distributing them to various staking providers, so we don't know where they're at. But it's like if they
Yeah.
if they eventually do control 2/3 of it, like A, would we even know? And then B, like yeah, like do we care is the question? Because this was like I know like some people have said like if they're just following all the rules, is that okay? Like if if Coinbase owns 2/3 of our validator network, but they're not censoring and they're following all the rules, should we just let them go?
No, I would say no. I would
No.
personally be like no,
Okay.
because you need to have like that's a huge failure point. And again, that's why it's bad if Lido. That's why Lido should have self-capped, right?
Well, I
Um,
think they did. I think they're just not admitting it.
I don't know, maybe.
This
Well, what
is
they are doing, they are making it better, right? And like to make the good case for Lido, they're better than a centralized exchange. It's nice that it's transparent, and they're working on that dual governance upgrade, which isn't out yet. So I'm still, Lido bad for not self-capping. But when they do get that, that's kind of the exit window on staked ETH. So it removes like the theoretical point of coercion that the Lido DAO could have by like purging operators from the set.
yep.
They can't do that without guaranteeing that you have a period to unstake your ether first and let it go all the way through the exit queue. And so that removes like the coercive measure that the Lido token could help. And so at that point, then I'm like, okay, yeah, Lido, you did it. Like I'll start showing the ETH validator chart without necessarily making you all like the same shade of gray as like a worst case scenario. Like maybe it's good. Maybe you are now actually independent stakers, and that's much better than what Coinbase would be doing. I don't know. If Coinbase got 33%, that would be terrible. I don't
Right.
really know what to do there other than like you try and limit their power in various ways. So, if everyone in Coinbase is staking and they're all going with MEV boost and they're all censoring transactions and they're doing everything that compliance would dictate, right? Like let's say we go back to the world where Tornado is OFAC'd and 80% of blocks are refusing to build it. Like I think Ethereum as a protocol at least needs to make sure that like you are forced to follow the rules first of all. So that's like the fossil, so they can't censor. And then maybe you know, it does have to devolve to the social layer at that point, saying like, hey, stop staking with Coinbase.
Yeah.
And like you hope that that just gets taken care of because like, you know, does Kraken then get involved and try and compete? Like there are other people who are going to want that money. So it's almost like
Right.
self-correcting, but I
Yeah,
don't
it's like
know.
you want to build the code so it handles it, but it's like it's difficult. and you kind of have to recognize it doesn't work. Well, this was I don't know if you were following the Bybit hack, the social layer discussion around that. Remember, people were
Yeah, I mean that.
like,
Well, that was none of that was in good faith, right? That was all like,
for sure. But it comes back to this kind of interesting discussion because like we have I forget what percentage of ETH was the Bybit hack. It was like a percent or something.
I think it was about half a
Um,
percent. Yeah.
yeah. But like let's say it was 30% of ETH. What do you do then? It's
Yeah.
like I mean there was because there was one guy on there who I was arguing with. He was saying that even if 100% of ETH gets stolen, we shouldn't do a social layer fork because it would prove that we're not censorship resistant. And I was like, listen, that doesn't even make any sense. Like,
Well, yeah, 100%. Yeah, you wouldn't. I mean, this is what terrifies me about the
right.
L2s, right? Because it's like you need to, we're relying on the base multi-sig, and you see Jesse from base is cheering like we have over 1 million ETH has been bridged to base, and I'm screaming, that's not good. That's like this is horrifying. Like we
Yes.
don't want 1% of all the ETH over on a centralized multi-sig. That'd be like cheering that so much of it lives on a centralized exchange, right? Which a lot of it does, but we don't like to, celebrate that the same way we do with L2s. And these are just big juicy targets that could get wrecked. And yeah, I mean,
But this,
there is definitely a number. It's not 100%. If it was 30%, I don't know if I would be in favor of that. Like
right,
I voted against the DAO fork, you
okay.
know. Um,
Yeah.
right. And then I like very sadly I was an ETH Classic guy for all of it. Took them to then abandon proof of stake. And then, they lost the mandate of heaven again back to current Ethereum. But
Yeah. I was probably more in the Bitcoin community around that time, but it was, but even then it was, yeah, it was tough to see which way was the right way. It was not clear cut in any way, shape, or form.
right. And it was different also, like than the Bybit hack. Like if the Bybit hack were 30% of Ether under the same circumstances where, it was interleaved with transactions, I think that makes it much harder to advocate for any sort of like rollback, right? Like, and I think the DAO hack, it wouldn't have even been up for vote if it wasn't the extremely unique circumstances where like it was still time locked. We could intervene and do like one transaction without affecting the rest of the history.
Yep.
And it almost like I almost wish that it had just happened, like it was just loose, because then I feel like again I feel like there would have been less temptation to split into like ETH Classic and Ethereum, and we would never have had to deal with this sort of code is not law stain on the reputation in the early days. Like that, that's Ethereum's mulligan that we just have to carry forever, in my opinion, like from my camp. But
For sure.
yeah, I mean, I think the Bybit thing is just the different circumstances. I don't think it ever would have.
Completely.
But yeah, if it was
But
like 50% of the ETH, then yeah, I don't know. Like,
well, right, like you have to pick a number at some point.
right.
I think but yeah, so I guess the other piece that people talk about with decentralization is just like how do you meaningfully measure it for a chain? Like even talking L2 decentralization or validator centralization is one thing, but like when you're talking about like those fork choice rules, like a lot of people bring up like USDC probably controls fork choice right now. Um, as
Yeah,
far as
yeah,
far as like if they picked one chain that was censoring, basically all the DeFi apps have to go along with it, or else you just wreck your entire system. Um, and like, what do you do about that as a chain? Is there anything you can do about it to fight back, or is it just something culturally you have to push forward?
that's an interesting one. I mean, I think there are ways to definitely measure decentralization, and then there are the ones that are unknowable, right? And so it's like you can look at metrics that like are hard numbers that we can determine. Like um, total cost of attack is pretty easy to reason about. Like we can look at Bitcoin, we see its hash rate. We can look at Ethereum, we see the amount of ether staked. We know like a dollar amount, and then there's some wonderful papers that look, and it's like, with different projections for how ETH would spike if someone tried to obtain 33% of the
Right.
supply over, and we have like historic data and we can reason about this. You can see like, well, they'd have to buy at this price and these projections, and you do all the math and you see like it would take X billions of dollars to attack Ethereum. That's like a pretty easy way to reason about that one. But then, yeah, the USDC fork choice rule is like,
Right.
knows, right? It's like, and especially with the real world asset thing, I feel like it almost helps Ethereum more if there's multiple parties who are relying on it for security.
Like if you have China and North Korea and
If like,
everybody's
yeah,
all running nodes and
exactly.
validators, and yeah.
Well, it's like if everyone has their stablecoin on Ethereum, then they're not all going to pick the same fork. There is no fork dictator. Like the temptation to just go with the neutral, like what is actually Ethereum is higher. We're not there yet right now because I
So
think
like is the path towards better decentralization like bringing on competing state actors?
kind of, yeah. I mean, I think a
Right.
big part of this is why like Ethereum's so focused on like credible neutrality, right? It's like they're not sucking off the White House right now. It's not like the goal isn't to be America chain. And I
Right.
don't know, Joe Lubin had this like crazy post that just made me think like we need to really all dream bigger. And he's like, countries that are at war with each other and have just been killing each other for 5 years should be able to sign their peace treaties on Ethereum without an intermediary. And it's like, I think that's beautiful. Like you need people who hate each other to all agree that this is like neutral ground, like just an actually unstoppable computer is useful for everyone to agree on. Like if no state thinks the other state can tamper with it, we've won basically. Um,
Yeah,
and
no,
I do think
yeah.
you get there, but
Well, what now we have like all the peace treaties being done by some CIA mediator who swears it's this is what they agreed to, and it's
yeah,
like,
I mean, I don't think it's ever going to be like peace treaties on transparent Ethereum. I think there is always going to
right.
be like let's go and have the U.S. broker it in Saudi Arabia somewhere, but like it's nice to dream that you could get there. And I think at
Sure.
a lesser level than, yeah, like if or even if like Tether and USDC split it 50-50 and like Tether gets banned by the US government and is now like not a state actor, basically.
But like they couldn't. I mean, they wouldn't, right? Because well, I mean, like the US dollar, like the US government actually could freeze Tether. Like
Yeah,
you could just make it, you could just say, like, oh, listen, we know your bank account. Like
I know.
we,
Well, yeah, that's where you'd need like really like the Chinese stable coin to come
yeah,
down. Or you just say like, yeah, I mean that's the problem with like all the real world asset stuff is gonna go that way. And it's like the issuers will, yeah, they'll pick a fork, maybe,
right.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that like that we turn into ETH Classic. That's the other part of it. I'm trying to think of like Tornado Cash, for instance. Like if you're interacting with Ether and you're just totally natively using ETH, like that's going to keep working even on the fork that isn't selected. If you're a non-financialized application, you don't really care that the value is forked off somewhere else. It's like, is there value in the actual decentralized thing, or is it mostly all in DeFi? And then is it actually all in like the DeFi using USDC or the DeFi that's actually, decentralized, right? Which is more valuable. Right now, I do think USDC has a lot of impact, but
I mean, how do you feel about that? Like I know you had said earlier, like the world computer was the narrative, right? And then like I would agree with you from being around back then. It seemed like that was what people were doing originally. But it seems that most crypto is just like digital financialization as the end goal. And Solana is very like forthcoming about it. Like we want to be a decentralized NASDAQ, whereas
yeah,
like Ethereum's still resisting that in at least in narrative, maybe not in practice. But like what?
yeah,
Yeah, like how do we get back? Like, is there a way to be credibly neutral and not have everything just evolve into finance since it's like the high
right.
paying,
Gotcha. No, I think so. I think finance is like obviously the big use case right now,
right?
but I don't think it's going to be what's around forever. Like you think of the internet, like how much of the internet is not financial, but we still find a lot of value in it.
Well, the internet's information, right?
Yeah,
Crypto's like is Like that was crypto's thing though. It added value, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
there's the value, but I think it adds the ability to like trustlessly interact with each other in a way like, the internet, at least what drew me in is, right, like Web 2 got very captured by like centralized actors. And
Yeah,
I think everyone feels that was bad. Like you're on social media, it's all censored. You can't see what's going on. You're like communicating with people. You don't know if it was like transparent. Just like half the apps we were using. Like I do think there's genuine real benefit in just being able to have like transparent compute that you can look at and reason about and see is doing things correctly without like centralized meddling. And that could all be built on Ethereum, right?
for
And
sure.
it's not financial in nature, and there's a lot of value to those. They'll be driven. And this is all very pie in the sky because no one's building that right now because that's not where the money is because it is all in finance. And
Right.
that's going to be the killer use for like the next, fucking 5, 10 years at least, I think.
But this would be like, yeah, because that's the one thing I always struggle with like a lot of the blockchain tech. It's like because if you want to be credibly neutral, you have this like block space that's basically open for auction,
Yep.
which like naturally lends itself towards financialized things. Like if you want to be like, because that's like if you want to be like credibly neutral, unfortunately, like it's credibly neutral to the highest bidder, which is like different in some for some use cases. It like sort of negates them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But there are ways around that. I mean, the first is you just have so much block space that
That's the dream. Yeah.
doesn't really matter. You can also do like this is kind of what the L2s do with like rollups, where like the entire trade-off of an L2 that no one really thinks of them this way, they are slower than L1. If you really think about like how they work and how you inherit security, like it takes, you know, a
In terms of
week.
finality, right?
Yeah, for finality, it takes a week on optimism. It takes a week on base. Like for a ZK rollup, most of them settle like every hour. But even then, you do a transaction, you wait an hour until you're on Ethereum. And that's why they can be so much cheaper, right? When they sell you the block space. Like I think there's no reason why like applications that are not so financial, they can still inherit Ethereum, but more slowly, right? Like if I'm playing Eve Frontier new game coming out using smart contract stuff, it's fun. It's like a toy application. Does this really have to be decentralized? Probably not, but like I appreciate that it is, and it's good that it is. I can wait a week for
Oh,
finality there, probably. And then to your point, like no one in finance is going to bid on that block space,
right.
right? They're just going to be on L1 or maybe like a really popular L2. And
Okay.
so like it'll always be affordable while it can still be neutral and still inherit.
Yeah.
That's why L2s are beautiful if they, cared.
Well, so some of this discussion has been kind of on the culture of Ethereum and more like the social layer piece. Um, where do you think the Ethereum culture should move, or like how do you think it's going? Because I see this trend, which you see in kind of a lot of kind of the whole crypto space. It's like the newer person incoming is like marginally less cares less about decentralization than the next person. So like now the new people like don't really care because all the believers were back in 2016 and now it's
Right.
we're tech people. So like as if we want to if we have 500 million more people coming on chain, they're probably not going to care much about this, right? So like how do we keep a culture going through that and still win?
Yeah, you can't rely on, I mean, it's like every group experiences like cultural dilution when it gets huge. You can't, like Ethereum culture can't extend to everyone using Ethereum. It simply won't happen. It already isn't, right? There are tons of people just using it for finance, don't care. And if everyone, the end goal is everyone's using software that's written on some L2 and settling eventually to Ethereum and all secured by Ethereum, and they won't even know. They'll be using their app, right? Like they'll be having fun and playing eFrontier, but they still deserve like the decentralization and all the values that we find useful. Like, they deserve to be able to learn about this and have open source software and realize that like their in-game currency is fairly secured, and
Sure.
like some among them will care. It kind of turns into like some people will care scattered throughout this world enough that like they can probably see what is working, and that's why it really falls down on the builders and like the people making the L2s, the people making the applications to, you know it's like it's easy to take shortcuts and be centralized. It is harder to be decentralized right now. Part of that is going to change, I think. Like this is something that Georgios asks a lot of questions on Twitter, and a lot of what they're doing with Ithaca, like the research L2 that Paradigm's been working on, is stuff like account abstraction, like email, passkey sign in. Like, let's make this better than the Web 2 experience. Like, it's annoying to go to your bank and like enter your password and get like a 2FA SMS every single time, and like use your credit card and it gets denied and they call you on the phone. Like, there's a lot of just consumer Web 2 stuff that sucks and is a horrible experience and is riddled with spyware that like we can make a better application for these people. It'll onboard them, and like it kind of aligns with values. Like you're not just reinventing all the suck, because what's nice about crypto a lot of times is like you build it once. It's a smart contract. Everyone else can use it, right? It's like everyone building on Uniswap v4 hooks right now, or everyone who's just like building DeFi Legos that boil down to Aave at the end of the day. So it's like you need one person to build this in a decentralized way, and then you get everyone else just plugging in. And it's, that's the big value add to people. Like, why build on Ethereum? Why use a blockchain at all? Right? It's like you can get like your ID, you can get payment, you can like click a button and spin up your company all in one button. It's sort of like these like Stripe Atlas like business plan things, but much less friction, much more accessible to global liquidity, and you build tools that can onboard users more readily. Do we get there? I don't know. I hope it doesn't just turn into like everyone gets Binance.
For sure.
But
yes, we'll fight against that.
Yeah.
Me.
I try not to rely on the culture, because I'm as much as I am a believer in the culture and a romantic, and I will always ride this ship down if it does fail. We can't rely on it.
Sure. Yeah, well, on the culture piece, you're also, I have to bring it up. You're also part of the Milady community cult. What is?
Yeah. Yeah, I used to work for Remelia briefly,
Yep.
the company that made Milady and runs all the existing endeavors there.
Can you explain it to me as a non-Milady?
Yeah, sure. So what I would say is, and again, it's Milady is something different to everyone you ask, right?
Okay.
Insofar as there is like any Milady culture that one can pin down, or like some value that they all share, I really think a lot of it is like what Remelia itself writes about in terms of like the new net art. It's like just free information, right? Like part of what drew me to Milady in the first place is they plaster everything with the viral public license. And so I came from like the free software movement just in the early days, like when I got into Ethereum. And I always get pissed off when I'm like Eigenlayer and Arbitrum and Uniswap are all business source licensed. Like, this is cowardice. Like, this should be copy left, like GPL, everything. And so they're the ones who like total post authorship, like everything about Milady. And it was very uncharacteristic for NFTs at the time, which is like, you own your art. They're like, no, you own nothing. Like, anyone can take
Right.
this, remix it. Half the people you see on Twitter wearing Miladies like don't own a Milady. They don't care. There's such a culture of like, oh, just put one on. There's a website where you just go make your own, and people are wearing them. And that was very championed there. And so there's this culture of like just totally free information, and that's free association. That's a free marketplace of ideas. And so that's why a lot of the ladies like come in and say stupid shit. And like there's a whole reputation that miladies are, but we have, all walks of life in there. And insofar as it's suitable for Ethereum, right? Like, what does neutrality mean at the end of the day,
Right.
other than like, we have to admit, like, Ethereum is used for terrorism, for distributing illegal materials, for money laundering. Like, it's all there. It's all on chain. Anyone can connect to it. It's also used for DeFi and serious voting and all sorts of fun applications. And so, yeah, Milady, like, there are terrible people who wear it. There are good people who wear it.
Well, that was, I know there was like a cancel thing, like Milady almost represents
Uh,
like
yeah,
post cancel now,
post
right?
cancel. Well, yeah, I think it
It's
does. It is post cancel. The cancel thing was like actually like, as far as I understand it, it happened before I came into Milady and put one on, but I've read And like I've seen the guy who started the cancel like made a whole Twitter thread like recanting it.
Yeah.
Apparently, it was like a hoax from a rival NFT project, like the one that went viral when everyone was like burning their miladies and dumping it in 2022. So I don't
Crypto
believe
is so
that.
much fun, right?
Yeah, it's so fun. Do I believe milady is like actually a Nazi anorexia death cult? Like, no, because I don't believe there's that many Nazi anorexic suicide people who got really into buying Ethereum NFTs, right? Like, I don't think that was a huge overlap, but who knows?
Wasn't then Vitalik like recently donned a milady, right? Or and I think that was genuine. I
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah,
it
it
was
was
definitely, I think, and he like cheese worlded the whole like silviculture society announcement, all he covered in like the milady stickers and everything. But no,
yeah.
I think again, it's that same idea, right? And it's almost, like I'm obviously biased, and I wrote like the milady zine, which was sort of the milady's love letter to Ethereum that like I gave out to people at in Denver.
Yeah, I would. I had my colleague brought me a copy. I
Okay.
should have had it on camera.
I don't know. I was gonna reach for my copy, but I also don't have it. I gave it to Vitalik.
Yes, it's super cool. I love the physical stuff. That's like, yeah,
Yeah,
like you should make like if there was like, yeah, a way to distribute that at like other events underground, it would be pretty
I
sweet.
know it's fun. I don't know if you got this one in DevCon. This was like all of Vitalik's posts about like the Ethereum roadmap over the next 5 years in like
Nice.
book form. This was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, just to get back to it, like half that zine was about like why Milady was a good cultural fit for Ethereum and vice versa. And it is. It's like what is credible neutrality mean? It's like let's
Right.
like actually. And no, and people always say like, what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's just like an excuse to do nothing. But I think at the end of the day, it does mean something, right? Like at the very
Yeah.
least, like neutrality is well understood where there are heavily polarized, pissed off people on either side of you, and you refuse to take any opinionated stance one way or another, right?
Right.
Like
Um,
I'm the guy in Milady who like actually believes that vaccines are good, and like I argue with a lot of other people wearing Miladies who don't believe that they're good, right? And like we can have this discussion, and we don't kill each other, and you
well,
know,
I think it comes in, like part of the credible neutrality thing. It's always like, there's always the weird questions about where does credible neutrality fit in, especially in like the ossification discussion. Some people say like Ethereum should never change and we should like stop updating the roadmap. Other people, like right now, there's like, the kind of like back to the L2 roadmap. Like, do we want to move in the way of sharding or L2s? And it's like, is there a credible neutral path? Like, not really. Like, you're either on one person's side or the other, and there's vested interests now with lots and lots of money on probably more one side than the other. But it's yeah. So I think there's like there's weird pieces to credible neutrality too. Um,
yeah, it's funny. I don't really think of it. Yeah, that's right. I feel like at least in terms of like the outcome of what Ethereum is,
yes,
like everyone uses a chain and no one can censor it. Is like at the bare minimum.
at the bare minimum, I agree. And I mean, like, how do you feel like Milady's probably like at least from my point of view, it's like one of the more successful like cultural movements on top of Ethereum. Like you have like maybe there's like the Vitalik longevity, plurality left side, and then there's like the Miladies, and then there's like the very technical people, the tech bro side, and it's like all of these different cultures that kind of
Yeah,
yeah, merge.
yeah. Milady is a funny one because I think that really came from a lot of just like net art people who don't necessarily even know or at first didn't really care about Ethereum or didn't realize how much of a good fit it was. Um, it's a new love for Ethereum that is blossoming. Vitalik was a good ambassador, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to continue that mission.
Well, do you think like in like kind of like on culture and politics, do you think like chain choice is cultural in some way? Like, if you're a new person coming in and you're picking Solana or Bitcoin or ETH, is it a technical decision, or is it a like it almost is a cultural one at its core?
Uh it's tricky to say. I think there's never gonna not be a cultural component for it.
Sure.
Um, but it's still very technical, right? Like no one who has to do anything picks Bitcoin because you can't do anything on Bitcoin.
Oh man, there's like a lightning network.
Yeah, all right, yeah, there's payments. We have a Lightning network on Ethereum too. It's called Fuel V1. No one uses it. Um, I think it's that one's kind of easy. Like whether you pick Solana or Ethereum, I think is always just like a symptom of when you show up too. It's like if you showed up as a young dev when Solana is pumping and you don't care about decentralization and you want to make money, you would pick the one that is going up and has other people like yourself using it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, let's say you were in charge. Like, how do you bring that new dev? Like, what does Ethereum need to just regain scalability and usage? Like, do we need the meme coin craze to be on good L2s, and that's how we sort of regain the newcomers? Or,
Yeah, I mean, well, there's also a culture about like who's building like shitcoin casino slop versus who is building like real applications.
well, right,
They're going to
yeah,
pick different places, right? Like, was there, did Solana have more devs this cycle? Yeah. What are you counting as a dev? You know, how many of the devs are going to be here in 2 years? Really, which chain won at that point? And that's sort of like the question that is impossible to answer.
well,
Like, how do
yeah, and I mean, like, I clicked the button and launched a meme coin on Pump.fun. Am I a Solana dev? Like, I don't
Yeah, I mean, I think the
know.
Electric Capital report that everyone was quoting for Solana has more devs filtered out token launchers as devs, but
Yeah.
I would hope they did. I don't know though. It's
But wasn't the Solana report like from 2 years ago that like wasn't it like 80% of Solana activity was one guy?
Yeah,
I,
I mean, there was a lot of fraud after like
yeah,
the Bankman era. Is Solana less fraudulent now than it was back then? Uh, I hope. I don't really concern myself with what goes on over there because I've found in general like arguments straight from the top from their leadership to be sufficiently disingenuous that I want nothing to do with their L1 at all,
sure.
right? And it's like sad because I think like a lot of people on Ethereum side like did give post SBF Solana benefit of the doubt. Like Vitalik Bull posted them out of the dirt with his like infamous tweet right now.
Well, I mean,
And
yeah.
then you have Tolly like arguing with Toggerel and everyone else who's ever launched an L2 on Twitter saying L2s aren't real. And like that's just such an intellectually dishonest position to take when like people have explained how like fork choice and validator choice and how like L2 bridges work and actually inherit trustlessness.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think you could make a nuanced argument that like, like L2s have more sovereignty than we assume they do, or something like that. But I feel like he narrows it down into such a yeah, divisive tweet
Yeah,
that it's
well, I know. And then people engage with him and he
right.
you know, I don't know, it's not.
Mastering Twitter.
Yeah, but like do I think there's longevity in that? No. How do you bring on devs? So to go back to your original question, I think like it's to just use kind of the superpower of building good things on Ethereum and onboarding people, right? Like dev onboarding right now still kind of sucks, which is stupid because it doesn't have to be. Like there should be, and like all the pieces are there, right? So I made a business recently. I went to Cali.gg. It's a piece of work from Ross and Catton and some of these like lawyer dev class of Ethereum user, where literally you press a button, you pay like $2 in gas, and it mints a legal LLC, like a Series LLC out of either the Marshall Islands or Delaware, legal entity. You can get paid against it. It's anonymous. It's on chain. It's an NFT with your deed in it, right? And it's like that's pretty cool. I've used Privy. That's pretty cool. I've used all the passkey stuff that like has account abstraction that's been running on various L2s. Like I think that's pretty cool. But like if you're building an app, like you're a CS grad in college and you have no career prospects because the economy's in the shitter and AI has eaten every single junior developer alive, what do? It's like, well, come to Ethereum. Here's a website. You press one button. You get a company, you get a database, you get payments, you get everything that you know you need to build an application. But it's all here because we've written it once and we can reuse it forever. And so like this is kind of a superpower for any developer. And like I've
I
been
like
finding
that.
actually very fruitful onboarding with like no coiner engineers is probably like my favorite class of people to bring into Ethereum,
Okay.
because like they're like, oh, it's full of scams, it's all dog shit. And I go, yes, it's dog shit full of scams, but it doesn't have to be. And here's how it actually works. Like, you know what a state machine is. You know how cool this is. Sit with me for 20 minutes and launch a smart contract. And their eyes light up. It's like launching a freaking rocket ship when you deploy something that, like, it's just there. It's code. You can never touch it again. And the Farcaster team was really funny. They had a reporter on recently. I don't know what publication he was with, but he was like a former engineer writing for one of these like tech publications, and he's doing like a deep dive on like, our blockchain's still scams, I think is like. And
Nice.
so he like, they had him like, he showed up to Farcaster and he's like deploying smart contracts. He's like geeking out. He's like, this is so cool. What the hell? I deployed code for $5 and it's there forever. And so, the future's bright. Like, eventually, I think people will show up, but there will always be a hot geyser of money that will suck in more or less talent.
So we just have to have like a support group that says, listen, guys, if the meme coin casino is somewhere else, that's okay. It's not the end of the world, right?
Yeah, you need to like, yeah, kind of, which is sad. And like, a lot of people
Right.
aren't willing to have that discussion, but it's like, if USDC forks off evil Ethereum, am I going to go there? No, like, I'll stay on real Ethereum, even if it
Right.
loses 95% of its value. But that's because like, I'm a religious extremist. Like, I don't know if you've seen like, like, your friends saw me in like the mask. I have a literal ritual, or I had a ritual mask with like a milady face on it, and like all the
Sure.
branding for Sigil. I go around in monk hood and robes, and it's all funny because it came from like one of my an angel investor who I tried to raise a little bit of money from to do the idea. Basically told me like, I'm an idiot. No one cares about decentralization, and like, you're basically a religious extremist for still continuing to care. I'm like, okay, thank you for all my branding, but like, I, is this what alignment is? Like, as not even a joke? Like, is alignment a real thing? Like, I think so, right?
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, yeah, we can have another podcast on whether or not blockchains are replacing religion and our digital communities as
Yeah, I mean,
as new spaces for us all, but this is might be a little out of scope right now.
out of scope right now, but I think you look at the Ripple posters, and
Yeah,
yeah, I think there's a religion there for sure.
right. All right, well, we're coming up on like an hour. What didn't I touch on for you? Anything sigil related or any other topics you'd want to sort of go over?
No, I mean, nothing Sigil specific, right? I think I gave the idea. Like, we're trying to be ethically launched, full range organic exit window having L2. It's like, we're gonna take it slow. We're not gonna shill. There's
Are you
still
going to have a token for it?
maybe,
Okay.
but the idea is to do it in a way that like isn't a problem. Like, no governance token, because then it's a Lido situation. Like, it's not Ethereum. The token is the governance. It can be captured by independent entities. Like, if there is any token, the only thing that makes sense is like, it is simply a mechanism to receive fees from the L2 and nothing else,
Yeah,
right?
do like a proof of work mining sequencer or something. Just take it back.
Maybe, yeah, something like
It'll be
something like that. But yeah, no governance token. I'm the benevolent dictator for life of the upgrade mechanism behind a
perfect.
very long time lock. So
Nice. And then yeah, well then I guess where can people find you? Where can people find out more about the stuff you're working on?
yeah, I am trying to use Farcaster more, but I'm still very active on Twitter. It's kind of
Cool.
like anyone can reach out, DM me, and see what I'm working on. Um, I'm Tim-Clancy.eth. You can also send me messages straight to ENS. I read every
Oh,
UTF
really?
encoded piece of hate mail. Yes, you may.
Nice. All right.
But yeah,
Speaking of which, I have to check my ENS mail.
yeah, make sure it doesn't expire.
Yeah, I'm pretty good there. But anyway, this was a blast. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you.